All right, Paul Hudrick is here. There he is. All right, Paul. The Sixers lose last night, and the Twitter world, which is a Sixers cesspool, is in a tizzy because the Sixers lost on South Beach to the Heat. They didn't look like they were very interested in the game. Reason for concern, or they're playing the Magic tonight, baby?
If they take care of business tonight, what do you have to be concerned about? They're the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. If they win one of the next two games, they are the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. So I think it's to have some concerns over some of the things you saw is fair. To me, the biggest, if you're going to look at like a concern, is if you play Miami, which is a big if because they might not play Miami.
It's a good possibility they will.
If you play Miami, they did a very good job against Joel Embiid. They did a very good job of doubling him, finding their spots and all that. Granted, I don't think Joel Embiid looked remotely close to 100%. I thought he just didn't look good all night. I thought he looked really lethargic. I think maybe he shouldn't have been playing, quite frankly. I think I get it. He wanted to come back. He wanted to try to help his team close the deal. He knew that Miami would be up for the game, so he knew his team probably needed him. But I just don't think he was at 100%, and I'm not sure he should have played. And I thought the rest of the team, kind of like what you already talked about. What I tweeted, and I still think this, is Miami is trying to avoid being the 6th seed. So they have everything in the world to play for. The Sixers still have 2 chances against a terrible Orlando Magic team that is tanking to win, to lock up the number 1 seed. So I don't think it's this big. Like, I see a lot of the narrative of, the Miami Heat were sending a message. Miami Heat can't worry about sending a message. Miami Heat just have to win basketball games. They can't be worried about sending a message. They got to just win. And the Sixers aren't as desperate to win. And I thought that's what played out. I thought Miami was the much hungrier team. I thought they played much harder. And I thought that was it. I thought the Miami Heat were the better basketball team last night. Does that mean they're the better team overall? I'm not so sure.
Right. No doubt about that. They came out with more energy. The Sixers looked, and the Sixers matched the energy, but then they couldn't hit shots, and then they just kind of went back into the cave. And I guess the one question is, does it concern you to see the way the Sixers handled that zone last night? Like I said, look, they're not practicing against the zone. If you're playing Miami and you're in a series, you're now practicing and preparing for the different things they do. But seeing how they reacted to that zone, not only last night, and a lot of NBA teams, to be fair, struggle that first, they see a zone, they're like, what the heck is this? And they don't practice against it all that often, so they look terrible. But does it concern you that that's a path to victory for not only Miami, other teams to implore?
I would say a couple things. One would be they've handled the zone pretty well, actually, throughout the season, especially now that they've added more shooting to the starting lineup with Danny Green and Seth Curry. They've done a pretty darn good job when teams have zoned up on them, and they've exploited it and they've busted it for the most part. Recently, there's been some struggles, mostly with the bench unit, with the all-bench unit, which, predictably, I hate to say, like, that all-bench unit it struggles against man-to-man a lot of times. So I don't know if it's necessarily just the zone as much as it's just the offense in general just really struggling with the second unit, not quite having it together. And the other thing I would say, Mike, is we just talked about the fact that they might see the Miami Heat again. You're not going to show your cards. You're not going to show the Miami Heat everything you have. You're not going to counter every move they have now and kind of just go all in and empty the kitchen sink to try to beat them, because you didn't have to win that game last night. It would have been nice to win that game. It would have been good to just have to take these last 2 games basically off and say whatever. But as I said, Miami needed this game much more than the Sixers did. And I thought that was not only in the way that Miami played, I thought it was in the way Eric Spoelstra coached. Eric Spoelstra coached that game like a desperate coach who needed to win that game. And I don't think Doc Rivers coached that way. And I don't necessarily blame him, because you might see the Miami Heat in the second round and you don't want to show all your cards.
Right. And as you know, Paul, if the Sixers would have won that game going away last night, the new narrative would have been, well, the playoffs aren't for 10 days. How are they going to keep this momentum? And they're going to have to sit for a whole week. So, again, nothing that happened last night. I know it's frustrating, and we all want to react to the moment. And by the way, I think it is fair to have the opinions like some of our listeners to, hey, Mike, they didn't compete. That's what's disturbing. Okay, they didn't compete last night. does that mean that's who they are? Are they a team that just doesn't compete night to night? I haven't
There's
seen
been
any
games where
evidence of that.
Miami hasn't competed this season. I mean, they just had a hell of a night last night, and they've been playing better basketball, and the Sixers have not. It's such a long season, and I just think we all just get so hyper focused on one game and one thing, or like one. Mike, they won 8 straight games. They didn't even play that well, and they won 8 straight games. And they had guys in and out of the lineup, and they won 8 straight games. So it's not. I don't see it as this one game as this big referendum on who this basketball team is. This team is on the verge of winning more basketball games than anyone in their conference. You don't get that way by being not competitive, by not having heart, by being streaky, or whatever anyone else says. They are about to win more games than anyone in the Eastern Conference. That is not a debatable thing. It doesn't matter how they did it. Doesn't matter who they did it against. There are no style points. They are about to have more wins than anyone in the Eastern Conference. That's it. That's a flat-out fact.
It is. And I guess the question off that is, then, do people view them as a legitimate contender, or they're the Atlanta Hawks?
I mean, I think that's silly. To me, I would say this. I think the NBA this year is more open than maybe it's been in, I don't know, a couple decades, or at least a decade, I would say. I think there are probably 7 or 8 teams. I'm not exaggerating when I said that. I think 7 or 8 teams could win the NBA championship. I think that many teams are that good. I think any of the 3 teams in the East I could see coming out, whether it's the Sixers, whether it's the Nets, or the Bucks. I think any of those teams could be the team that winds up representing the East. And then out West, both LA teams, and then the Suns and the Jazz are both having great seasons. I mean, you can make a legitimate case for any of those teams to possibly reach the NBA Finals. So to say the Sixers aren't a contender, I think is crazy. I mean, they are a contender.
Yeah.
They are going. They're going. They're going to be right there. Now, with that said, if they wind up playing Miami, and this is like so far down the road, but if they wind up playing Miami in the second round and they lose to Miami, yes, that would be an enormous disappointment. But it would be an enormous disappointment because your expectations are for them to go farther than that. So to say they're not a contender, I think it's just silly.
I would agree. No, and I'd say there's only 5 teams that can win a title, and they are and this sounds odd, but it's the Lakers because they have LeBron, it's the Clippers because they have Kawhi, it's Bucks, it's Philadelphia, and it's Brooklyn. Other than that, I don't know that there's a player in the league. Now, one might emerge. Maybe it's Booker, maybe it's Mitchell, maybe it's Booker and Paul. But to this point, none of those guys have been good enough to be able to win the title because they have the best player on the best team. So somebody new would be emerging for one of those other teams that I didn't mention to win it all. And by the way, one of the guys who I think has emerged new is Joel Embiid.
Absolutely. And even like Joel Embiid is certainly like that. That's to me is why, like, if you're looking at the entire league and you're looking at kind of to your point, you're looking at the best players. I mean, Joel Embiid is arguably the best player in the NBA this season. So you're going to tell me that the team that has the best player in the NBA is not a contender? And a team that has the best player in the NBA, and when he plays, their record with him, and in the record with him and Ben Simmons together, it's dominant. I mean, they have been a dominant basketball team when both of those guys have been in the lineup. And I'm sure if you looked at a lot of the other teams in the NBA, that would match. You talked about LeBron and the Lakers. How have they been faring without LeBron? How are they faring without LeBron and AD? It wasn't going so well, was it? Like, it's the reality that when you're missing these star players, it hurts, and it's not an excuse. It is a reality. And for the Bucks, they've been lucky that Drew Holiday missed some time, and and that's when they struggled, right? When they had their struggles when Drew Holiday was out of the lineup, but they played better basketball when they've had Giannis, Middleton, and Drew Holiday. The Nets, obviously, I mean, when they've had guys shuffling in and out of their lineup, but when they've been right, they've been great. So I think that's the other thing is just having those great players. I mean, to me, Devin Booker is a guy I think is like criminally underrated. I think he's phenomenal, and I am very anxious to see, to your point, how he looks in the postseason. I think him and Chris Paul, I could see them doing some damage. And it's not just those two. They are a tough-minded defensive team with some physical veteran players. So I think they can make some noise too.
All right, Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers. The Sixers play tonight against the Orlando Magic. And as we know, Paul, a win and they are in. So they still have tonight and then again on Sunday. If they were to stub their toe tonight against this Magic team, who, by the way, has lost 5 in a row, it's kind of hard to see Orlando, who's lost 5 straight, all of a sudden end the season on a 2-game win streak on the road, mind you. So it feels like the Sixers are going to get one of these two here, but are they going to be at full strength tonight? We're on a back-to-back. You're traveling from Miami back to Philadelphia. Is there any anticipation that some guys might not be playing tonight?
I would have to imagine that they're going to go full. I mean, I don't know yet, but I would have to imagine they're going to go close to full strength. I mean, Matisse Thybulle will still be a question mark, I would think, because of that hand. But I would think that starting 5 is good. They want another shot. And listen, I think one of the benefits when you talk about, and Doc Rivers referred to it as an ass whooping last night, and that's what it was. One of the positives of that can be, to everyone's point, yeah, they won 8 straight games, but they didn't play particularly well. Maybe they needed a punch in the mouth. Maybe they needed this. Maybe they needed to get whacked and realize, all right, we got the playoffs are about to hit. We need to get going. And now that we only have 2 games, I know this is an Orlando Magic team that isn't good, but we got to show up at home. We're at home where we're almost unbeatable. We got to show up and we got to just, beat the snot out of the Orlando Magic and close this thing out and then, and regroup next week and figure this out. That's the other thing too, Mike. I think people they're going to have like a week off. And all the teams that aren't in the play-in are going to have a week off. So everyone's going to kind of be in the same place as far as rest and as far as that maybe those competitive juices not being as up as they would be for those top 6 seeds.
Right.
And the other teams playing desperate basketball. So that's going to be a factor. That's not nothing. So, but yeah, I would expect that they're going to play, that they're going to go mostly full strength. And
no Dwight Howard.
Do, and they, sure. No Dwight Howard because of the suspension. Sure. If they show a pulse tonight, they should beat the Orlando Magic.
Yeah, that's true. There is no Dwight Howard, which means I guess you're going to get Mike Scott in backup center minutes, I would imagine, or maybe they'll get creative and do something different there. But that's the one. So it's tonight at 8:00, correct? It's an 8:00
8
tip?
o'clock,
Is there any reason for that?
Is it national maybe? Is it a shared national game perhaps? I don't know. But
it's Orlando.
I prefer 7 o'clock, Mike, because I don't like to be up late. But.
Right, exactly. 8:00 tonight, and then it's a 7 o'clock game on Sunday, and then that is the end of the regular season. Of course, you'll hear both those games on 97.3 ESPN. Tonight, 8, Sunday at 7. If the Sixers win tonight, they're the 1 seed. If they lose tonight and win on Sunday, they would be the 1 seed. Now, what's the scenario, Paul, that's the most disastrous? They would lose both, and the Nets have to win both.
Correct. That is where we are, I believe. I think that's where we're at, where the Nets would have to win both. Sixers have to lose both. I got to be honest with you, Mike. I don't even want to go down that path because if they lose 2 games to the Orlando Magic,
you're right.
Home,
but to be fair, if they lose 2 games to Orlando and then they drop from 1 to 2, then I think you can make a legitimate argument that I cannot believe in this team.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge concern. Absolutely. If you lose 2 games, this Orlando Magic team is so bad. Not only are they so bad, they're not trying to win games. So, I mean, if you lose both of these, that raises much, much, much bigger question marks than anything that Miami game could possibly raise.
All right. He's Paul Hudrick. Now, let me ask you, it's Hall of Fame weekend. In your time covering the Sixers previous to joining us here, Paul was over at NBC Sports Philadelphia. Were you there for any Kobe Bryant years? Were you there his last season?
I think I was an intern maybe during like his last season. So like it's so vague, the memories of that. But I remember the game after he passed when they played the Warriors, and I covered that game, and that was. It was just such a weird atmosphere, and Joel Embiid hits that fadeaway wearing number 24, and it was just like I'm actually getting like goosebumps thinking about it because it was a tough night, man. It was anyone who is a fan of the game of basketball and watched Kobe Bryant's career, it was a weird, rough night to be there, but at the same time, it's something I'm never going to forget, and it's a pretty awesome memory to have.
Now, I was at the last game that Kobe played in the center. And I remember the traffic was so bad that I missed like the first 4 minutes of the game just trying to get in. And if you remember those first 4 minutes, I mean, was maybe one of the greatest 4 minutes that he ever played.
I do.
Right? I mean, he didn't miss anything.
Right.
He was going bananas, and I got in. The place was electric. I said, "What I miss?" They're like, "You missed the whole show. Kobe was the whole show." My gosh. And he'll go into the Hall of Fame this weekend along with Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and 6 others, I believe, are going in Hall of Fame weekend for the NBA. All right, Paul Hudrick tonight. Who's at this game tonight? Are you there?
It'll be me. I will be there.
All right, Paul will be there tonight at Paul Hudrick. And, of course, you can follow him on Twitter for everything tonight. By the way, it looks like Embiid is probable and Thibault is questionable. That was a Keith Pompey tweet about 2 minutes ago. So there's the latest on that. So it looks like Embiid is probable to play tonight. All right, Paul, good to see you, man.
You as well, Mike. Talk to you soon, man.
Paul's back on Monday when we know where the Sixers will be. We will not know their opponent for the playoffs on Monday, but we'll be breaking it all down right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.